Hi and welcome to the 12 Months to Marathon podcast with me, John Hill, the running podcast for over 35s with Marathon Dreams. Welcome to episode 4, and I deliberately spoke on the first 3 episodes about background and also about change, because what I wanted to do was really set the scene for how you start any journey when it comes to running, or also how you get better at running. And the reason why I do that is because that's the type of people that I'm encountering and I work with. I'm working with people that are either starting out or people who want to fulfill their potential. And by that we mean doing a personal best over half marathon distance, or taking on their first marathon, or looking to improve a marathon. So I deliberately thought the best way to go would be to talk about how to manage change, because it's what I've always done. And the third element to that, so we did the change process, we did the aware process, which is how you make changes stick. What I'm going to do now is introduce you to a concept that I learned a few years ago, and it's very powerful, and it's really useful across any change mechanism or across any endeavor where you're trying to improve, particularly running. Because we in society tend to be obsessed with tactics, and what we should be obsessed with is principles. So today I'm going to be talking about the difference between principles and tactics. Okay. Now, bit of background. The most important thing you can ever be is consistent, particularly when it comes to any fitness related endeavor, particularly because we get better by doing things consistently. I am a very simple man, a very simple coach, and I like to use the expression, you only get better at the thing by doing the thing. And that's so true when it comes to running. You only get better at running by running. You only get better at running faster by running faster. You only get better at running further by running further. One thing that gets really confused, and this is a tangent actually, which I'll come back to on another podcast, is when people say you need to run slower to get faster, they don't mean you just run slow all the time. What's important is recovery when you're doing anything like speed work or distance work. How you recover from it is as important as the actual training itself. But that doesn't mean you don't do the thing. You need to do the thing to get better at the thing. And you need to become comfortable with the thing to improve it. So that's a principle. The principle is you have to do the endeavor, whatever the endeavor is, in order to get better at it. We can't sit there and use stories or use emotion to move us away from the work we actually have to do. If you want to be a better runner, you have to learn to be a better runner. So, principles versus tactics. Let's give you some examples. So if consistency is a principle which can be applied to a lot of things, the tactic is the particular running plan you are following. But the principle is consistency. Okay. Let me give you an example in the diet world, which is another area I'm very familiar with. People look for a different diet when they're not sticking to the one they currently have, because they're not being consistent with their current eating plan. They don't need a new one. They need to stick to the one they've got. The problem is with lots of diets, as an example, is we can blame the diet versus the principle, if that makes sense, versus ourselves. So if we're not consistent, that's the problem. But we can go, well, I tried this, it didn't work. And we keep blaming the tactics instead of attacking the principle. Okay. So when you're looking to become a better runner, you need to look at the key principles that you need to adopt. If your problem is consistency, getting out and running, that's your problem. The problem isn't the training plan. The problem is the consistency. As long as you've picked a training plan that's doable, as in you can do it, because if you've picked a plan that is physically impossible for you, then that's a different issue, but that's rare. Usually the problem is the principle of consistency. Another principle is organization and time management, and I kind of touched on this in my podcast regarding change. Those are skills, and if that's your problem, then you need to work on that versus the particular running plan that you have a problem with. You need to work on your organizational skills, because that's a principle, yeah, and that can't be argued, yeah. So consistency can't be argued. Nobody can sit there and say, I'm going to get better at running by not doing it. You can't argue that, but you can say, well, I downloaded this plan and this plan didn't work for me. That's the difference between a principle and a tactic. So don't get too muddied by tactics and individual things. Look at the principles. So let's say we are quote unquote marathon training. Yeah. So in my experience, 16-week training plan, that's a principle. Yeah. You have to follow a 16-week training plan. You have to be consistent with that training plan. You have to make sure you do enough distance to prepare you for the day itself. Yeah. That's another fundamental or principle that I would choose to adopt. Okay. Then what you can say is, well, actually, I'm not going to do any speed work. I'm just going to do loads of miles, which will get you around a marathon. It won't get you faster at a marathon, arguably, but it will certainly get you round a marathon. So at least then you're adopting the key principle of, I'm going to follow the training plan and I'm going to do the number of miles on that training plan. That's a principle. Your tactic would be, well, then I'm going to add some intervals in to my training plan to get faster. Yeah. And to try and improve my overall time. Because getting round a marathon and getting faster at a marathon are different things. Okay. When I coach people, I always recommend that people follow a get round plan first. And then if they want to get faster, then follow a get faster plan, if that makes sense. That's how I do it, because I think that tends to work better for people, because the overall load of a marathon training plan is a lot for somebody who's brand new. So telling them they've got to do intervals as well could overwhelm them too much. So as you can see what I've explained there, I've just talked about principles. I've said, right, so principle number 1, 16-week plan. Principle number 1 for getting around a marathon, just follow the right number of miles. Yeah. Principle number 2, 16-week plan again. I want to get faster. Okay, you need to do some intervals. You need to do some hill training. Now, I'll call them intervals just for the purposes of this, because obviously there's different words used like tempo and threshold and all this, but let's just call them interval training. So running faster, basically, to get faster. So if you look at principles again versus tactics, if you're trying to get faster, you need to run faster. Now, the tactic you adopt to run faster, whether that's fartlek, whether that's tempo, whether that's threshold, that's different. The principle is, though, you need to run faster. You can't argue with the principle of running faster to get faster. Yeah? If you want to be a better runner on the flat surfaces, you potentially need to do some hills, because then that's going to make you a better runner on flat terrain. Okay. Again, if you're a trail runner, which is not my bag, but if you're a trail runner, then you need to run trails. You can't run on the road and expect to be a good trail runner. Do you see where I'm going with the principles here? It's about these core principles that can't be argued. And if you adopt that approach, you don't get too caught up in information. My job as a coach, and my job here on this podcast and giving you the information that I give, is to get maximum execution, not maximum information. We need to get you executing. And to execute, you need principles. Now, again, going back to the diet and weight loss world, which is traditionally my background, eat less is a principle. The particular diet you follow is a tactic. Because what we don't get into then is dogma. And dogma is a problem because it doesn't allow for flexibility. And it's the same with running. If you're dogmatic, I have to be a certain way, or I have to follow a certain plan, that's a problem. But you can't argue with, you need to run more miles. You can't argue with, you need to prepare for this length of time to run a marathon. Yeah? If you're conditioned well, I did a 12-week plan for my last marathon because that's all the time that I had, because I'd just finished training for High Rocks. Does that make sense? So when you start to give people principles, what happens is you see the overwhelm dissipate in them, because what overwhelm is usually is a lack of clarity. It doesn't mean you've got too much to do, you're just not clear because you don't know what's important. Whereas if you've got key principles you need to follow, you can be laser focused on those principles. So if you know your problem is consistency, you can sit there and write down, how do I become more consistent? That's my number one priority, and then work on that. Yeah? How do I work on becoming more consistent? And then because being consistently slow is better than being intermittently fast, if that makes sense. So it's better to be a consistent slow runner than a intermittent fast runner. Yeah, because the fast run might look good on Strava and it might look good to impress your friends. But what's really impressive is consistency, because that means you're building effective habits. And principles are a better way to build habits because you're not hopping from thing to thing. Okay? You need to see things through as a runner. You need to follow the plan. And to do that, you need to understand the key principles, that matter, not individual tactics. That comes later. First is principles. What principles do I need to get into place? How can I be more consistent? How can I be more organized? Yeah. I've talked about this a lot. One of the expressions that I loathe is time gets in the way. Life gets in the way. Yeah. Life's always going to get in the way. Mark Twain said that life was here first. It doesn't owe you anything. Yeah. Life's always going to get in the way. There's always going to be something you have to do. So in order to get around that, to perform at your potential, you need to be smart and you need to look at principles. So if that's the case, you need to be better organized, because the stuff isn't going to change. What happens to us all. Yeah, and that I'm talking purely from a running sense here, because if you want to be a better runner, you want to train for stuff, you have to make it fit around those things in your life. Otherwise, you can't do it. And that's okay. Sometimes you have to change your expectations to match where you are in your life. But you can't say life gets in the way and then say, well, I want to do marathon PBs. Well, which one is it going to be? So there, you're going to say, my principle is I need to be more organised. Yeah, I need to sit down and actually organise things out. That's the principle. And then what you do in the time you've organised is the tactic, if that makes sense. But you attack the principle first. I use an expression which is attack the right problem. And usually the right problem is a principle thing, like consistency, as an example. So just to round this off, so it's clear, the question to ask yourself is, what are the key principles I need to work on? Not, I need a new running plan. Not, I need new trainers. Not, I need, those things all matter at a micro level. But if you want to be a better runner and better at most things, you first need to say, what's the key principle I need to adopt here? So for me, as somebody that's lost weight and somebody that's trained for multiple marathons, multiple races, done multiple PBs, good times over the age of 35, I knew I had to be consistent first and foremost with everything that I did. Because if I could do that, then implementing certain tactics will be a lot easier. If you hop from thing to thing, that's your problem. You need to fix the problem of hopping from thing to thing before you fix the things you're hopping from. Yeah, because you'll always blame the things you're hopping to, and they will become your master, and you will never take responsibility. And a really good way to understand responsibility is what the word means, which is your ability to respond. You are response able. Yeah. And if you've got key principles in place, like consistency, like organisation, then you respond better. Your ability to respond is better because you understand those key principles and you don't blame the individual tactics for things that you can fix. So if you can understand the difference between principles versus tactics, adding on to the concept of the change process and how to make changes stick, you're going to give yourself a fantastic foundation for not only improving your running, but also excelling at it and fulfilling your potential. So that's it for episode 4. Like I've said before, I want to keep most of these episodes short and punchy, so you can listen to them in bite-sized chunks. I do appreciate you listening to the podcast. Please make sure to like this podcast and share it, and drop us a follow wherever you get your podcasts from. I really do appreciate it. And if you know anybody out there who's a keen runner who wants to learn more about how you can go from 0 to marathon in 12 months over the age of 35, pass the details on here. Let them give it a listen. I'll be more than happy to help. Thanks very much. And again, if you want to get in touch with me, best place to go, hop over to Instagram, 12 months to marathon, give me a follow. And you can message me over there if you do want to have a chat about getting some support. Thanks very much, and I'll see you all very soon.